Joining us for the next hour is Green Party candidate for governor, Christina DiGiulio. Why are you running for governor?
I'm running for governor to give people another chance. The third party is a very critical aspect in our political system, and I am also here to say what the other candidates are not saying. So I'm also using this as a platform to speak out about some topics that are very important to me and many others.
Welcome to the PCN Call-In Program. I'm John Cole. For the next hour, Green Party candidate for governor, Christina DiGiulio, will answer your questions. Our toll-free number is 1-877-PA6-5001. So, Christina, before we get into policy and why you're running again, let's talk about your background.
Let's do that. So, yes, I am actually currently retired from analytical chemistry. I did work for the Department of Defense for 6-1 research. It's called. It's basic research in our government. And I was supporting the Iraq wars, doing some explosives detection, using sensors to find explosives. And, I got sick with Lyme disease and it disabled me. And so now I'm recovering, and I decided to start giving back to my community. And I'm now a community watchdog using my science and understanding of analytical, like water testing. I decided to be a community watchdog and help people through the, issues they have with some pollution or, abuses to their water and air. So that's pretty much, so now I'm here and running for governor.
You mentioned your background being an analytical chemist. So what inspired you to pursue that line of work? Was this something you were interested in growing up or later in life?
Actually, I think I had a full scholarship for gymnastics to another school, and I had to drop it. And I wanted to be a veterinarian then. And then I ended up, having to find a state school, pay for it myself. And I ended up, moving. It was basically a professor and maybe like a show called The X-Files. I don't know. I wanted to be a forensic scientist, a forensic investigator. So I made a degree that looks like that. However, I ended up with the DOD. Thankfully for a chemistry dean who really took me under his wing and got me some awesome with ORISE, Oak Ridge National Institute. It's a research developed. So it got me in the door. Yeah, I'm grateful for that. So yeah, I didn't plan on this. It just happened. It's great though.
Can you talk about what you gained from being an analytical chemist for the Department of Defense?
What I gained was a lot of skills, working on instruments, and as well as a lot of the complexities of the bureaucratic system. Learned a lot about that. And I was actually a contract officer representative and went to their defense acquisition school for program management. They made scientists kind of be cheaper paid lawyers in a sense, because there's a liability with a lot of these things we're doing. And we needed to understand how to manage contracts and how to communicate with, our contractors. That's traceable. We had a lot of problems in the government with that in the past. So I gained a lot of, wisdom about things I never really had any interest in. And then I got to see some really cool things in the government. We can go places that most people cannot. I learned a lot about, the difficulties of war. It was very emotional and very traumatizing to see what happened to a lot of our soldiers. And science, a lot of science I learned. It's a very diverse background. When you work for the government, you go to some interesting places. So that was what I learned a lot. Some things you can't talk about too.
In addition to also, again, serving as an analytical chemist for the Department of Defense, you also have co-founded the Watchdogs of Southeastern Pennsylvania and the Better Path Coalition. Can you talk about these organizations and what's the goal of them?
Yes. The Better Path Coalition is a coalition of a lot of grassroots and some green, NGOs, non-governmental organizations that got together across Pennsylvania. We have a lot of groups fighting a huge infrastructure system, and a lot of it's similar. It's kind of like we wanted to start getting together as a statewide coalition to start talking about the issues. Pennsylvania is a gigantic state, so it's hard to travel, and getting together on weekly calls is a way that we share information and resources and help each other through things and start to see the system as a system, especially the fracking fossil fuel system, which is mainly why the Better Path Coalition was founded, based upon fighting fracking and the harms, the health impacts. So WASIPA is the other one. It's Watchdogs of Southeastern Pennsylvania. This is a friend of mine, decided to, it just happened because that's what I did. And we decided to put it into action so we can possibly get grants and, do this for a living and help educate communities of how to empower them, how to watch, document, and how to legally keep yourself at a place when you're being kind of abused by a bully type of a corporation or anything like that. And it really brings community together to start looking up and seeing what's going on around you. So I utilize science. We do sensors. We deploy sensors, like air sensors for people. It's all open source. So people, it's not like we're hiding anything. And we're helping with research with a lot of other organizations and, universities, for example. We have a few I work with. So once you get all those networks going, I'm like, well, what do you do with it?
Well, how would your background, again, serving in the Department of Defense and starting these organizations help you if elected to public office?
Understanding a bureaucratic aspect of things, how the government works, how to communicate with, especially like scientific organizations. Since I wasn't in one, I know a lot of, some of the issues within them. So I'm not going and yelling at some guy who's in a lab who's just trying to do his job really well. The system is kind of fixed in a way that makes it difficult for some people to do their jobs and the way they probably want to. Learned about that. So I have very much empathy for our work, state employees, for example, and, DOD employees. So that's basically, I think. Did I answer your question?
Mm-hmm. And so again, you're running for office for governor right now. Do you have any prior political experience?
No. Somebody tried to ask me to run for board of supervisors in my township here in Upper Euclid Township in Chester County. I said no. I liked being on the other side and doing the hard work. It's basically about accountability. Keeping agencies accountable and seeing how we can help, change things for the better.
In an interview with KRDP Community Radio, you said that your ticket was campaigning as, quote, disruptors. What does this mean?
I am a full-fledged supporter, and I am engaged in, exercising my First Amendment rights. Basically, civil disobedience and nonviolent direct action has been a way that, when you do all of your due diligence, you've done everything that's out there and you're still being harmed or seeing harm, you have a duty to speak up and a right to do that. And so when I say I disrupt, I say disrupt the corrupt. So if I see corruption, I'm going to be there with, whatever way. I have actually gotten arrested stopping a pipeline in my area and was found not guilty based upon a justification because the judge said we were in imminent dangers. The harm I was trying to prevent was lesser than the harm being done to us, which is an interesting ruling. So yeah, that's disrupting, stopping things that are not good, not healthy, they're wrong. So
I know you mentioned, again, on your platform that ending corruption is a key part of it. But before we get into that, for those who aren't familiar with the Green Party, can you explain what some of the core beliefs are for the Green Party? One of them is an anti-corruption. We also are very outspoken about environmental damages and environmental topics. So we really fight for a Green New Deal. We are absolutely climate action oriented, meaning we see the science and understand it, and we listen to it. It's not a belief system. So, we're basically here to help also create sustainable localized communities. So the Green Party really focuses on localism, and that's important to get communities together and create a structurally sound foundation, which is our, smaller communities and for our society. We have Medicare for all. Also, equitable education is a major one, and housing is a human right. There's a lot of, but I think right now with what's going on, there's a lot of focus on, the environment at this point, and that's why I think they chose me because of what Pennsylvania is having a large problem with right now is fracking and the health impacts that have happened and how it's actually impacting our climate. So how would you say the Green Party differs from the Democratic and Republican Party, specifically on the environment, as you just mentioned?
Yeah. So let's, I know our current Attorney General Josh Shapiro. He has, utilized one of in his job has brought up a lot of these polluters to a grand jury and has placed criminal charges on several of them. And he utilized what's called Article 1, Section 27 of our Pennsylvania state constitution, which guarantees people the right to clean air, pure water, and the preservation of our natural resources for future generations, as well as repairing the damage that has been done, because we're, setting up our future generations, to have what we have, or better. So I do think that he sees how important, protecting our environment is. However, I do not agree with some of the false solutions they're placing, thinking that we need a just, sustainable transition, equitable transition, off of fossil fuels. And what we're seeing right now is a perpetuation of that. So I know that Mr. Shapiro supported a hydrogen hub, which is a very inefficient. I could get into that, but it would not be where we would go as the Green Party. Mastriano, he's I don't know, I feel like polar opposite. I don't have much in common with the other candidate, but the Republicans and Democrats kind of are, the Republicans kind of claim to be conservative, which I believe they're regressive at this point, taking away things that we have. And then the Democrats are chasing and trying to preserve everything. So they're almost the conservatives. And what the Green Party is the left side, which needs to push that spectrum, that bar back to the left. So we get that balance we need, because it seems to be moving a little bit right. So yeah, the Green Party is a little different, because I would say it's farther left. And when it comes to environment, it's a just, equitable transition. And it's the new Green Deal, which has not been, they have RIGI here, RIGG. Oh my God, I'm losing my mind. I think Wolf supported it. I do believe that Shapiro said he would support it as well, which I would too, because if it's what we have, I would. So I can agree to that with him. I don't think the Republican Party would even have any of it. So there's a large spectrum shift.
Earlier in your answer, you talked about Attorney General Josh Shapiro, who again is not only serving as Attorney General right now, he's a Democratic nominee for governor. How do you think he's done with some of these environmental issues serving in that role, and specifically on the Mariner East pipeline, considering that you've mentioned in the past how that is one of the reasons you declared your candidacy for governor?
Yes, it is. It's a major reason. I would say how he supported it. It's great to bring them up and get it on the record that these guys, that these companies, which they are serial, polluters, serial offenders of our clean streams laws. So it does a lot to put it on record and say, with a grand jury, what he did, and get all of it on record in the government. So we know the harms, and he has all that information. I'm not sure I agree with how he used it with environmental statutes, which only allows for fining. It's a small step. We need people to take bigger risks on this, because when people's health is impacted, like our health and safety should be the primary duty and the priority of our public service. And public servants, and if they're making excuses or compromising for that, I don't accept that. So it's okay. I would say he did all right. I'm grateful that he's looking at it and getting on record that, the DEP is not functioning well, they're not doing the best they can be doing. And that he did acknowledge there's a lot of legislation and a lot of changes that need to happen within our laws. So we'll see.
Do you think pipelines like Mariner East provide any benefits to Pennsylvanians?
Yeah, there is a false narrative in there. When it talks about Mariner East, it is absolutely not for energy. It is transporting ethane, propane, butane. They're trying to, make plastics. These are feedstocks of plastics and a byproduct of fracking out in wet Marcellus Shale out in southwestern Pennsylvania. So we're getting not the methane, which is what everybody utilizes for energy. Here, we've got the byproducts coming through Mariner, and they grandfathered this pipe in for a public utility using their old pipes from 90 years ago that actually transported from the refineries in Marcus Hook out Southwest and actually was utilized as a public utility, like airports, and had to be fueled. That was used to reverse it, go the other way, and ship ethane to Europe and make plastics out there. So there's little benefit. It's a lot of harm, which is not being documented as well. I would say a lot more harm than people understand at this time, and a lot of danger and risk. People are in imminent danger with this pipeline, and it's a very poor reputation as an operator. Energy Transfer is the company. And the jobs in economics, they're temporary jobs, most of them. And, there are not as many jobs for the harm that's been created by the pipeline. I would say that. So I don't know if there's a benefit. If there is, I don't think everyday Pennsylvanians are going to see it.
You mentioned in an earlier answer, and you've talked about it during the campaign, that your administration would, quote, support an urgent transition away from fossil fuels to 100% renewable energy. So how would your administration go about this transition away from fossil fuels, and how would this impact the average Pennsylvanian?
Yeah, there's a lot to that question because it would be a really large task. However, one thing we know is we have everything available, and the technology, the abilities there. It's just where our government has chosen to invest and subsidize. It's kind of just throwing us backwards. So a just equitable transition would absolutely consider, fossil fuel workers' jobs, and that they'd have to be trained properly to move to the next, which, is going to be a renewable. These are very talented workers. There's so much in that. And they, could just have job training that would be like renewable. It's a sustainable lifestyle for them too, less movement. The other thing is we have to talk about fracking and stopping the methane from leaking out. There's no way to frack without methane being released. So I don't know if anybody ever says that. No, not true. It's always going to come out. And that's a terrible greenhouse gas. We have to stop. We have to ban fracking and put a moratorium on fracking immediately for all new wells, no more new wells. And then a, step process of a decommissioning of current operating wells, as well as a very, very strict system of maintaining the orphaned and abandoned wells or the old wells that are done, because there is a maintenance issue and they will start leaking and harming communities. So there's a lot to it. In that, would also start investing in actually localism, communities, like how communities actually need and what they want. So it would have to be a lot of community involvement. We have to get people involved in their government again. Locally, you have to take part because we need the ideas from everybody else and what their needs are. So that's how I would look at moving from fossil fuels in a just, equitable transition. I'm not sure if I want to get any more into the details, but I think that lays it out pretty quick. Some of the main points of it, and we need a diversified, renewable energy grid or system as well, so we can diversify how we get energy, that is less not based on combustible fuels or harmful fuels, things that have require extraction of our natural resources and harms to communities. We do not want sacrifice zones anywhere. So
1-877-PA6 5001 is the number to call. We're going to go to Jean in Wellsboro. Go ahead, you're on PCN.
I would like to know about drinking water standards here in town. The borough leased all the rights underneath for fracking, and then they put that in $1 million plus to our water system. We kept having boil water things, and we don't anymore. And the thing that I wonder about is I never hear anything. We have a what would you call it? A little message thing that comes with our water bill once a quarter, but they never mention any of that. And I'm wondering what the law is as far as telling on a what do you call it, basis, on however often they have to have it done. And I'm also wondering how much the law says that they should have. The other thing is when you talk about these things like you were talking about fracking, you said something about methane, but most of us don't really realize what it is that's the problem with a lot of these things. And so as you talk about these various topics, would you say more about the kind of stuff that the average person would, so they know what the problem is and the description and the how? Do you see what I'm saying? Yeah, thank you.
Okay. I'm going to start with your drinking water. If you have public water, which is meaning I heard you say that you have, bill. So that obviously it's not a well. We have a lot of problems in fracking with wells, but public drinking water is the company that you have. There are absolutely standards. There's DEP standards. There's EPA drinking water standards. And those companies that are supplying your water are responsible for testing. And you should be able to look at their water testing from the local plant or the company, or if not, you can inquire about that and see what levels they have in it. As well, you can also, formally complain to the Public Utility Commission in Pennsylvania if you're having any water issues with the billing or not being fully informed about what's going on in your water. And the DEP is also another, agency to reach out to. They all do have standards. The main thing is to find out who your company is, you probably know. And then you can also get your own water tested out of your tap. That's another option. So you can correlate like what they say they're testing for. It's very important to ask the company what it is they're testing for when you're in the area of fracking, because there should be doing, if they have a wastewater plant and you're drinking actually either their well water or remediated water, you have to find out the source of your water and figure out what their standards are. The other one you said, the kind of stuff that's going on in fracking, I believe, is the chemicals you're concerned about, or what it actually is. So like what fracking is they're drilling down a mile down under the ground, and then they're going over horizontally and like putting a lot of pressure out, which is out of these tubes that end up like forcing high pressure water and sand and a lot of other chemicals to fracture the rock. And what it does is it's old fossils that are like in there, and they're grabbing the gas that comes up. So what you're going to get at fracking pads and whatnot in the air is going to be more than methane. In southwestern Pennsylvania, you have methane, butane, and also benzene. With that, so you have leakage there. When they bring up their fracking brine, which is what they pressurize down the borehole to crack the rock, that is toxic. Actually, they're bringing up radioactivity. Radium. It's Marcellus Shale is one of the highest radioactive shales. I think it might be the highest. So everything that goes down is coming back up, and they have no cradle to grave for that waste stream. So there's people in landfills have noticed they're dumping that stuff in landfills, and it's leaching into people's water and leaching into our rivers and whatnot. So there's a lot of chemicals, a lot of volatile organic chemicals, which are very dangerous. And I'd say one of the most dangerous you can find is benzene in the air has been a huge problem. And then like the radiation when it comes to the fracking brine or the water, that is a waste product. I hope I answered your question.
Staying on the topic of fracking, again, you've talked about your support for banning it in Pennsylvania. So can you talk about how would you go about this? Would this be, again, a transition period? Would this be immediate? And would you go about this either via executive power, or would you have to work with the state legislature to accomplish this?
I do see the way, and when you go to legislature right now, we're ran by the Republicans on, I think, both sides. It's going to be a hard thing to do. I'm not sure what executive powers I could have, unless what I would do is make it a just transition. Like I said, you just don't stop the faucets. That's unreasonable. We have to really set in like a foundational system for this to happen. So there'll be a lot of talking, but 5 years to 10 years, no more fracking should be a very strong rule of thumb, because that fits in with the IPCC, all the climate, information, the data that climate scientists are saying we have 10 years. Well, a lot of the numbers that we've set that, our legislators, our politicians have locked us into are way beyond that. And we don't understand the feedback loops at this point. So it could accelerate out of control. We have to act immediately, and be sensitive, like, equitable about it, right? Not trying to take anybody's job away or collapse the economy.
So you mentioned, again, being like a 5 to 10 year period perhaps to ban fracking. And you mentioned, again, currently, if it's not by executive action, if you were to work with the legislature, there is a Republican majority currently in the State House and State Senate. You kind of alluded to in your answer that you think Democrats may be more agreeable to something like this. But even if the Democrats took control of the State House and State Senate in this upcoming election and you were elected, do you think there's enough Democrats that would get behind this?
I do believe, I hope so. A lot of Democrats, I mean, I have Senator Katie Muth, for example, is my senator, and Representative Daniel Throtton. I know they are definitely would get behind it. And from what I understand, there is a lot of fear. I think people are not fully informed as to the possibilities because the government's kind of shuffled them and trapped them into like spending money in the wrong places. And it's almost like looking like an impossible task. The longer we wait, the worse it's going to be. So yeah, I think they would get behind it because we're going to start seeing, I mean, we already are seeing really bad flooding. We're seeing, basically our planet's on fire once, if you can't see that it's going to happen, eventually it's going to come to you or us, it's going to harm each individual. So I think with that in mind, I hope people do care about their kids, their children, their grandchildren, and really help set up the platform for them to have a future, to be able to breathe air and have clean water. I think they'll be good.
An initiative you brought up earlier in the program was the Green Party really embracing the, quote, Green New Deal. Can you tell our viewers what exactly is the Green New Deal? And if you were elected and were able to implement something like that, what would it look like for the average Pennsylvanian?
I mean, the Green New Deal would absolutely address the things we've already talked about, and just equitable transition. Job training is a major one because we're always fighting the economics aspect. The other one would be subsidizing. It would start to subsidize actually like that transition instead of subsidizing like a multi-billion-dollar cracker plant in Beaver County, for example, which is going way backwards. And for plastics, single-use plastics, we don't need that in the oceans either. So it would be the Green New Deal is actually addressing the current issues and trying to set up a sustainable future. Of course, it's jobs and economics. It would be localized community energy grid. We have to fix our grid immensely. It's very scary. And to make it sustainable for us to live, important. Very much a large part of renewable energy is going to be a huge part, obviously. And a lot of reparations is another thing. Reparations for the harms that have been done to those impacted by this, type of energy infrastructure.
How many years would it take to implement something like the Green New Deal and for Pennsylvanians to really see the impact of such legislation? I
would hope that not long. It's already set up. It's written. It's there. It's just about how to actually make it happen. So it'd have to be voted on, obviously, and that could happen anytime we bring it up. So it doesn't have to be a rush. I would say immediately we start talking about adopting that federally and in each other in statewide too, in each individual state to have, usually the states have to get together and can push the federal government into doing something that's happened several times in history that, so we have to act immediately is not a joke. This is listening. I'm a scientist and there are scientists chaining themselves. Scientists are getting out of their labs. That's scary because I'm a scientist. We're kind of reclusive. We do our stuff, and to see them out there, that panic, it's a panic because they're seeing the slow movement. So if I'm in there, we're moving much faster, and we have to, find the qualified individuals to start talking to our legislators and fully informing them and educating them about what's really going on versus like kind of the lobby who's in there right now, the money, and those who have, they're profiting from this. They have a lot of control. That's not who our public servants represent. I don't know if they remember their oath. So we have to think about the people of Pennsylvania, what they need.
You talked about, again, joining with other states to pursue such an initiative. But if there were other states that exactly weren't, joining with this, could Pennsylvania go about it like a go alone strategy, so to speak, or could PA enact certain legislation that would mirror the Green New Deal if the federal government did not enact this?
Absolutely. I mean, a state can always go above any federal law or regulation. Like, we can do more. We can't go less, but we can absolutely do more. So absolutely we can. And it's, Governor Wolf attempted that. The Democrats, I believe, attempted that with RGGI, which is out, kind of floating out there. Yeah, it's very possible to do it statewide. And, the just transition is actually local. So our state needs to, instead of subsidize like fossil fuel industries that are taking the money outside of Pennsylvania and into people's bank accounts, we have to start putting our money, our tax money, into our own state. Pennsylvania can absolutely do that.
Do you think energy costs would be impacted for the average Pennsylvanian if this legislation went through?
In actuality, solar is really cheap. So I'm not sure. We have really high propane costs now, and they're taking it from us. It's our natural resources. So I'm not sure how that works. We have it coming out of our ground, and we're paying exorbitant amounts of money right now for the energy. So that's weird. So I think that once we're off this, we wean ourselves off, you're going to see absolutely energy costs go down. There's probably going to be some fluctuations and some fears of the market. They do play games with us. So I do 100%. It'll be less for energy costs. I mean, water is going to be more than gasoline soon too. So let's just think about, I think we have to think about the main, what our natural resources really are and what we really need to survive and prioritize that. So energy is absolutely coming from the sun, from the wind. We can extract already natural resources that are non-harmful to people without a doubt. So yeah, it's a tough world out here right now. It's hard for people to, and it's a scary thing. And that's when you see money, the prices of things fluctuate. I'm not sure why it's that way. The one thing I don't want people to do is panic because something that they're familiar with and that we're almost addicted to is going to be taken away, because it is just, people need to start addressing that to themselves inside. We're not going to be on fossil fuels for very long. It's even fossil fuels itself only has so much, and then we run out actually. So eventually we have to start getting into the mindset as communities that we want to move to something that's much healthier and sustainable for us. And the money, the Pennsylvania can buffer for that if we have to. We could subsidize. We could, have relief programs if we need, because it's usually going to impact the most vulnerable communities. These types of price fluctuations or inflation, and we have to protect our most vulnerable communities better.
Let's give our guest a break while we take a look at PCN's upcoming program schedule. Coming up next on PCN, On the Issues looks at criminal records clean slate law with Representative Cheryl DeLozier. Watch next at 8 p.m. On Thursday night, join us for Journalist Roundtable. Charlie Thompson of Penn Live, Stephen Caruso of Spotlight PA, and Steve Ulrich of Politics PA are our guests. That's tomorrow at 7 p.m. PCN continues its tradition of bringing Pennsylvania high school football to fans across the state with Game of the Week. Don't miss Conneaut take on Titusville Friday live at 7 p.m. Production courtesy of Stream TV. Stay up to date on election 2022 with PCN. Watch debates, candidate interviews, and more on demand for free at pcntv.com/election. And also, please find a moment to thank your local cable company for PCN. They carry us on their channel lineup as a public service. We receive no state or federal tax dollars. Once again, that's 1-877-PA6-5001. We're going to go now to George in Cumberland County. George, go ahead. You're on the air.
The disingenuous laughter is not going to solve the problems of Pennsylvania. Banning fracking and having natural gas when we live on top of two-thirds of the largest natural shale ridge, where it produces trillions of tons of natural gas and all the types of gases and the byproducts therein included that would help in manufacturing, put Pennsylvania way ahead of the curve. And only the things, the natural gas and the high temperature gases that are there in that type of gas that can produce things in industry that you need to live, exist and those kinds of things. To remove that, you're not going to get the heat from electric, you're not going to get a hit from solar, you're not going to get it from wind. How do you expect to fix the things in Pennsylvania when you negate the things that are our resources?
All right. Would you like to answer George's question there about he sees, again, there's benefits to fracking. He believes you see it differently. Why do you disagree? Or will this pointer answer his question?
I don't necessarily get, so science doesn't necessarily care about my opinion or anybody's. It's what it is. Nature is that way. And so I don't have choice. Pennsylvania has been fracking for a long time, and I don't see us really ahead of anything at this point, but I do see harm. And I get that we have this reservoir of, gases that are of ancient creatures that are basically dead. It's death, and they're bringing that up. And I don't know how people I hope that people understand that I get the idea as a scientist. I work for the DoD, that we can use these things. It doesn't mean we should be using them when we have the data showing that it is absolutely, you're going to want to have a planet, first of all, to actually, live in or eat or enjoy those things with all the natural gas you're using. If it's not here, what's the point? We have to preserve our future for us and for the future. It is absolute scientifically proven that methane and these things are not okay for our atmosphere anymore. We have done that damage, and it is time for us to be accountable and responsible and look at how we protect our own planet and all life on this planet, because we are absolutely harming it as human beings. And if we cannot be accountable for that because we want something and it's easier that way, and because we have it, it shows we have not learned our lesson as a species at all. We exist. Nature needs us. We don't need it. And she's in charge. It's not, I don't have a choice. I'm just a scientist who studies it, and I observe and report. I apologize if that is scary for people or seems impossible. Like I said, we frack here in Pennsylvania. We've been a legacy fossil fuel, with Sun Oil that came from Pennsylvania, who's now Sunoco. I get that there is a, in Marcus Hook and a lot of these areas, basically communities based upon this. So it's not that we're neglecting that. It's that we're scientists saying this is causing harm. And we're finding out that even the workers in the industry are getting very sick because they're not fully informed about what they're working with. And there are loopholes that the industry takes, like OSHA and whatnot. We are working with things about radiation with these workers and people. I had a friend pass away recently who is a worker in fracking, and he was a mentor to me, and he absolutely understood work for the industry, and he died because the radiation was so bad, and his face started his cartilage went away, and he had to go through some terrible things. And this is a worker. Several workers are now whistleblowing, talking about this. So I'm sorry that the industry did it to themselves. They did it irresponsibly to cut corners, and that there's a repercussion to that. It's a dirty fossil. It's a dirty fuel source, and it's not because I have an opinion or it's it's this versus that. It's because it's what science is saying. The studies are, and it's not a belief system. It's peer reviewed. It's very hard researched and a lot of data. So I appreciate what you said, George. Though, thank you for asking the question.
The last question I'll ask in regards to the environment specifically is, again, if you're elected governor, of course, you'll have the power to dictate more policy in regards to the environment in the state. So are there any other states nationwide you think Pennsylvania should model their environmental policies after?
That I don't think I can answer that. I do see, for us, actually, currently right now, I don't think I would be able to answer that question because it's been kind of, there's been a lot of pushback, at least on the East Coast, with this. For example, New York banned fracking. So did Maryland, the states around us. They knew it because they took our data from our health studies. There's a compendium. They looked at that, their governor, and said, we don't want this here. So other states to model, I think there's a lot of piecemeal things we could look at, ways maybe some local communities have ideas, how communities are blocking, these these bullyish companies from coming in their community if they want to protect their community. It's, Pennsylvania has Article 1, Section 27. There's the green. There's also the Green Amendment, which is, Delaware River Keepers. It's similar to what we have. And so we're kind of ahead. We're only one of 2 states, I think, maybe 3, that actually have protections for that, which is odd. It's hard for us to enforce it right now for some reason. As well, there is nature's rights, the rights of nature movement, which I think some states are adopting, even some countries are. So, there are these types of policies. And I can't remember. I did read there's some water preservation, like stopping privatization of our water resources and keeping it to the people, like having the people own the water, which is important because that's our we're going to have a lot of water problems in the future, with what's going on. So we don't really want to contaminate what's there or let anybody else take it from us. So.
Now, I know, again, the environment is a major part of your party's platform and your specific platform for governor. But another thing that you have mentioned in your run for governor is that you and your running mate have talked about ending corruption as a main part of why you're running for governor. So can you give us some examples you're seeing of corruption existing in Pennsylvania today? And how would your administration specifically address it?
Yeah, so this is where you can go down a rabbit hole when you talk about corruption in Pennsylvania. There's a lot of conflict of interest. There are legislators, senators that are profiting from things, and they're sitting on like the Environment and Energy Board. I don't think you're objective. You should have no connection. And when we were DOD, they had to know everything. Since I was working with contracts, I had to disclose everything of mine so that I had no conflict of interest in my job for what I did. And I didn't give any gifts away. Speaking of gifts, we have gifts. Pennsylvania actually still does not have a gift ban. So people are going away on vacations and they're basically buying people off, essentially. So who are they actually working for? So, there's campaign finance reform, obviously, is in need. It's just so much money that's going into it. The public funding, like democracy dollars, we have to be distributed by state. Basically, we have to think about what democracy means, right? The people have to own their government. And when we're getting large donors, the donors don't do it, right? Because they're just nice. They get something out of it. And so we have to look at how and who is giving money, how. The PACs are kind of hiding it. But you have to look at who your elected officials are really working for. Because I'm not making that up. Like, it's actually in our history. We're watching it right now that some people are actually profiting from fracking while they're making decisions about, who and how far legislation can go with that. That's a little far off. And the outside employment as well. We have a revolving door. It's dangerous. Why would a really CEO want to be a CEO or even like a shareholder of a law firm? You know how much money they make. Why would they all of a sudden want to become like a state judge? It's a huge drop in cost. So there's an intention behind that. I think people are mostly good and want to serve. Not everybody. So, when you have like judges, for example, making decisions or hearing cases that have to do with fossil fuel, and yet they're invested in it or their firm is like a lobbyist for it. That's happening right now in Pennsylvania. We have to clean the corruption up. Lots of conflict of interest goes on. And when you have gifts and lack of, people should be heard by their legislators. Why money speaks so much louder, I don't know. But if we have to remove those little gray doors or, that ability because people are abusing it, then we have to, enact, anti-corruption laws. We would start with a gift ban, to be honest. And that's on March on Harrisburg, who's a, not-for-profit, do a lot of great work. It would ban any gifts over $10 and it must be reported within 10 days kind of idea. That's like an example of, it's pretty common sense in my opinion.
We're going to go to Shamokin now. Jerry, you're on PCN.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to make a comment. I have never heard of the lady until today. Listen, I think she's terrific. You shocked the heck out of me. My question is on the natural gas, and is I at one time did a lot of research on the natural gas because I was part of a union that was getting the workers there to build the places, and the original studies came out, showed how safe, how contained, how everything they were going to do it, and of course we know people didn't live up to it. Living here in a coal region, all I got to do is look around and see how they destroy the creeks and the air and the landscapes. It's horrible. And they have special deals in Harrisburg that if they don't touch it, they don't got to clean it up. So, is there any way that you feel they could fix the natural gas fracking?
At this time, it would be and by the way, I'm sorry to hear about that. In actuality, Article 1, Section 27, that green amendment that's protecting our water and stuff actually was created by a gentleman who also saw the destruction from the coal industry. This is a natural resource extraction state. It's a historically, it's a resource extraction state. So we've watched how industries come in, go bankrupt, and leave us with the cleanup and harm in communities. And Harrisburg hasn't fixed or have not created protections. For example, in fracking, they have a well. When that well is drilled down a mile, it's going to be there forever. They have to seal it or cap it. It's surrounded in cement. That cement can crack after 20 years. So that is it's got to be maintenance, or else it's just going to start spewing out stuff. We have to put escrows and much more stricter regulations if they're going to have these things, instead of going bankrupt and leaving us with it. And the DEP is overwhelmed by it. Then we have to enact protections that they have to put a bunch of money away, and they're responsible and accountable for the uptake and the care of that well for a lifetime, no matter what. If they want to drill, if you want to do this in our state, these are the rules we're going to have to do. And mandatory cleanups, obviously, if there's been any, found spills, we've seen a lot in landfills, and they just wipe their hands of it and, pass the hot potato. So we have to just make sure that they have a cradle to grave process, which is taking something, you make it, you have to follow that chemical all through the process to when it's done or taken care of responsibly, or, whether it be incineration, which I'm a fan of, but your waste is your waste and you're liable and accountable for where it goes. So it's about traceability. We haven't even gotten there in Pennsylvania. I'm sad to say there's a lot of untracked waste, a lot of things that we have to find yet. So that's a whole nother thing, the cleanup that we already have to do. And we just keep puncturing holes in the earth and creating more to clean up. So we're really behind. And I think communities deserve their streams, to be repaired. They can do remediation of these streams. Absolutely. And if Harrisburg doesn't force it, that's not going to happen, sadly. So I appreciate your comment, and thank you very much, sir.
On your platform, you've also talked about ending corruption. Under that, you had a bullet point specifically about, quote, corporations pay their share of tax. So what would that look like in a DiGiulio administration?
So I'm sorry to say this. I don't know what, I'm not sorry to say this, actually. Yes, we would tax the corporations, much more than we are doing right now. There's a inequitable tax system at this time. A lot of it gets pushed onto the people, but corporations are literally using our water. They're using our land. They're polluting our air. And for me, I'm not afraid to go and tax a corporation in an equitable way. We'd have to figure out a way so we don't collapse some of these. But if they are polluters, I would even consider, if you're polluting in this state, in our air or our water, you will have higher taxes. I'm sorry, because there has to be accountability. We have to clean it up. We need the money in the state. We're going to have to subsidize these cleanups. DEP is going to be responsible for it. So the money has to come from somewhere, and they don't just get a free ride for the utilization of our land and our state. I don't buy that. Oh, we're giving you jobs is actually enough, because you're doing a lot more and profiting a lot more than the money you're paying workers these days, or the benefits you're giving them. So we got to even it up. Mainly, profiteers need to be held accountable, and that means you're gonna pay your fair share.
In Governor Tom Wolf's latest budget, Pennsylvania passed legislation to cut the state's corporate net income tax rate from 9.99% to eventually reach 4.99%. So we actually saw the legislature recently agree to decrease that over a few-year period. So why do you, again, you talked about how you don't feel that way, but why do you think Democrats are supporting this? And imagine those on the left agreed to lower this rate. So would this be easy to get legislation passed to raise it like you were saying?
Yeah, it would raise it. Yet, it wouldn't be like over. It would be more of a, we have to think about this a little differently. Like, can't just say all corporations, right? So there are corporations that benefit. So it's like when we say like a sustainable, like, a sustainable economy, we have to think and consider, like I just said, the polluters and whatnot. Not all corporates. Like, I think that we have such a like a uniform code here, and we're gonna have to get more creative and actually, have, the corporations that are harming and yet profiting, pay more money into it for the harm they're doing. And as well, when your Democrats are raising, the only thing I could think of is if this happened after COVID or whatnot, it has something to do with helping. A lot of businesses closed during COVID. A lot of people were harmed, small businesses especially, and I can only imagine that. I don't know if this is like reparations or why they would think to lower it, because that's less money in our bank for our budget. It doesn't make any sense. So I can't really speak to why they would do that. It doesn't seem very smart. I'm sure they have some reason though. I don't know.
In your answer, you actually just talked about the COVID-19 pandemic and the impact it had in Pennsylvania. Of course, it impacted nationwide and worldwide. If you were in office the past several years when the coronavirus pandemic first hit and to this day, how would you have handled it differently than Governor Tom Wolf?
I'm not sure I could have. That was, have we ever been through a pandemic before? Ever? I mean, that's an unprecedented. I'm not going to go hard on somebody who just happened to be in an office at this one time. That is unprecedented. So I would absolutely, I have no problem with always, learning from the past is a good thing. Constructive criticism of anything. I think Governor Wolf did make some mistakes when he had allowances of some, remember when we were locked down and under quarantine, there was businesses that were allowed to operate, and some of them were actually the fossil fuel industry, which was absolutely ridiculous. They're in my town building a pipeline with hammer drilling while there were children getting homeschooled for the first time at their house. It was almost, it was not an essential, I think it was called essential workers. My mom's a nurse, I know essential workers, the people who are working with our food and getting our food from place to place, or even giving food for people, that's essential worker. A lot of people who keep our economy running are those who are, like UPS and all these companies, they had a lot of work to do, and that's an essential worker because people needed supplies and we were quarantined. I don't know if I'd do anything different. I think there was a lot of backlash about the masks. I don't see why that's a problem. It's a mask. I still wear my mask around today, because I have autoimmune, and my mother, we have cancer in our family, and vaccines do not work on some people who have those issues. So I am completely supportive of, the mask mandates, and I don't necessarily tell people how to behave when legally they're allowed to. It is upsetting to know that people are a little angry about it when it could be a lot worse. We lost a lot of people, and I don't know if I could do much better in that situation, but I'd absolutely learn from it. And we'd have to set up a better system, to pinch in on the things that weren't working or people are complaining about, and learn. A think tank is important after these, an after action report, essentially talking military, and identify where we can improve. I don't think it's going to be the last, pandemic, to be honest. with climate change.
So the coronavirus pandemic polling would show that it was a large impact for people voting in 2020. A lot of their people based their votes off that. In 2022, polling does not seem to indicate that, but you're going around the state, you're talking to voters. So what are the issues you're hearing most often in the state? We just have a few minutes left, but talk about what you're hearing most from voters that you're talking about that is the most pressing right now.
I'm going to go with healthcare. A lot of healthcare. We have a lot of mental health issues, a lot of stress and trauma that's not being addressed. And so our healthcare system should be, healthcare is a human right. Of course, we have, abortion issues that Roe v. Wade happened is so backwards, but women's healthcare, like abortion is women's healthcare. And, these decisions are between the pregnant person and their doctor. So, let's talk about our health is so critical. We are foundations of the society as women. And that seems to be the biggest fear, I would say, of people not talking about it. They look at me because I'm running and I think I'm going to get Mr. Shapiro hurt by, and they're going to vote for me and Mastriano might win, which is actually, there's no data to support that right now. And as well, I am the first and foremost person who says vote for women's rights. And that means whatever you want, whatever candidate. I just am here to give people a chance, a choice, because mostly we bring out voters as a third party. We really do, and we keep getting harped on for that. So that's the topics that people kind of come up to me with is like, what are you doing? Abortion, and I have seen, and when it comes to issues, it's healthcare. People are like so overburdened with the costs of healthcare, medications. People are like choosing which medication to take, and some of them are essential. It's sad, and we need a Medicare for all system. That's the one. And of course, climate change in my realm. I was trying to go outside of that though, like to let you know about other issues, which healthcare would be, and there's guns. I had a lot of talk on guns with a lot of violence. It usually erupts right after we have an incident. And sad, I live in Philly and there's a major, issue here. So we need some massive reform on that. And it seems like nobody has the answer just talking to people, but they're very scared and they're scared for their children, what they're going through in these days. It's sad. They don't deserve that.
Unfortunately, we are out of time. Green Party candidate for Governor Christina DiGiulio, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Coming up next on PCN, On the Issues looks at criminal records clean slate law with Representative Cheryl DeLosier. Watch next at 8 p.m. And if you didn't get a chance to call in and comment during our show, you can post your question or comment to our Facebook page or on Twitter. I'm John Cole. Thanks for watching.